before you have it, you're standing in the desert. And the problem is you're walking through the desert, and it can be hard to know if you're getting out to the oasis or actually walking further into the desert. And that has always stuck with me because I do think that can be what the journey feels like for sure.
Did you clear your cash flow?
I'm excited to have you on, Rick. You've got some, impressive background here in Philly. You've got two companies that are pretty well known in the Philly and abroad areas. Boomi, which you exited to Dell and spent some time at Dell. That's like a DevOps orchestration automation layer type of a platform business. And then Guru now, which is like there's a lot of similarities, I think, B2B SaaS, but categorically, it's so interesting how different they are. The audiences and market segments that you're serving. Guru is more on like the knowledge base, wiki, internet, Chrome extension side of the SaaS world. So I just, let's dive in. I'd love to hear the stories of both. Specifically, I'm really interested in hearing your ideation phase stories, and then kind of like when you started to realize you had product market fit, how did you grab onto that and scale it and, grow through those, that first, million ARR threshold. And
Totally.
Let's dive in. I'd love to hear more about your background on those.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Definitely two very different things, as you said, Brian, and thanks for having me on. I think one thing we were my co-founder Mitch and I were obsessed about is Boomi is I think a vital category, like a thing enterprises really need, but is more on the under the hood, how things run. We would jokingly call ourselves plumbers, and with Guru, we really wanted to go into the world of the end user experience, and that was what we did. But really, the origin story for Guru all started through lived pain, lived experience at Boomi. We were trying to create a source of truth for our employees. And it was, different teams would need it for different reasons. If you were in sales, it might be consistency in message and positioning against competitors. If you were in support, it might be how to quickly find the answer to solve the customer problem. If you're in HR or leadership, it might be how do you get sort of the high signal important thing in front of the employees? We've changed an OKR or an important update or something you're seeing in the news. Here's what to say about it if you're asked. We just ended up with this kind of patchwork of things to try to solve it. And I think the biggest things we found is just adoption. People just wouldn't use systems like this. And we dug into why, and a lot of it was around trust. It can be hard to create these systems, especially when you're using multiple tools, and the information will go stale, and it's out of people's workflows. It'll be out of their minds. They won't, remember to go there. All of these sort of things. And we were like, boy, this really does seem like a vital problem, and we should really go and solve this. And looked hard at the space. And I remember the moment, crystallized moment, when I was like, we have to go and do this. And I was still at Dell at the time, and I was at a Gartner conference, and I walked into this session that was talking about intranets, and was talking particularly about a vendor of an intranet, a big one. And I walked in and kind of sat down in the back to listen. And this big room of people, hundreds of people gathered, kind of like IT leaders, execs sitting in the room. And up front on stage, you have Gartner analysts. You don't have the vendor's not in the room at all. No one's there, but the customers are there. And there's this kind of tension in the room, and the session starts, and it kind of breaks down halfway through because people are just sort of, they'll have those microphones set up that you kind of walk up to, and people, there's lines forming the microphones. So I'm like, what's going on here? And there's this emotion starts to happen, and these customers of this solution are mad. They want a cloud solution, and they don't have it, and they're talking about all these, and they're hammering the poor Gartner analysts, right? And I'm sitting in the back, and I'm like, where's the vendor in all this? And the analysts are trying to field the questions. And I walked out, and I was like, that is such a set of emotional output around this category of software. And look how unhappy these people are. Like I've got to go and do this. And that was sort of the moment I remember coming home, remember talking to my wife, Jen, and being like, this is it. This is like sort of the next chapter for me. And yeah, I can kind of jump into those early days up to 1 million in ARR, but yeah, that was how it all started.
I'm curious though, it's such a different sale. Like, I don't know the exact price points, but I have to imagine like Boomi's probably like a multi 5-figure or 6-figure enterprise sale. You're probably charging up front for the year, whereas like a Guru is maybe like, a few dollars per user per month kind of sale. And you probably try to do more like product led growth on the second one. And so it's like, how much that you learned from Boomi applied to Guru? Was it just like did you have to relearn everything and like retrain everything you learned from the previous one?
It's a great question. I mean, I think the things that were transferable were more like company type things, like culture and hiring and how to create a execution culture. To your point, like business model, yes, they're both B2B SaaS, but to your point, very different buyer. One has like Boomi was, as you said, like it's called an iPaaS, integration platform as a service. And like, if Boomi is doing its job, if no one's using it, right? Like you automate things with Boomi, right? So the problems happen when humans get involved when it doesn't work, right? Once you set up these automations, and sure you'll add new ones, but like it's very opposite, right? Whereas Guru, the whole thing, and I'll share more about that sort of early traction, but like the whole thing's end user adoption with products like this, and so it's like a UX mattered, I think, in both, but like UX had to be an obsession with Guru, so a lot of that's different. I'd also say like the journey to product market fit also didn't really feel any easier. Maybe it's for all the reasons you're saying. It didn't really feel easier. It felt like there's an entrepreneur, David Cancel, and he talks about finding product market fit. He started like 5 companies, and he says, before you have it, you're standing in the desert. And the problem is you're walking through the desert, and it can be hard to know if you're getting out to the oasis or actually walking further into the desert. And that has always stuck with me because I do think that can be what the journey feels like for sure. But yes, very different all around.
So I think that is such a great analogy. I'm going to steal that one from you at some point. But let's play on that though, in both situations, on the Boomi and the Guru. So like the desert story, like the desert metaphor you just shared, what was that like on Boomi? And when? Yeah. So what was the ideation? Basically, when did you put yourself into the desert and start that journey? And then at what point did you realize you found the oasis and realize that you were headed in the right direction and kind of latch on in that direction?
Totally. Yeah. On the Boomi side, I mean, interestingly or not, painfully, maybe is a better way to say it. I think the early chapters of Boomi were pretty painful for us. And they were painful because this is the on-prem software days. I think important point there. Pre-cloud. Cloud really was the transformative.
This is like early 2000s or?
Yes. Product cloud was really the product market fit transformative of that. Before that, what we sort of stumbled in and realized was critical problem. Every business has it, and there's 100 solutions. So the problem was not, do businesses care about this? Yes. The problem was differentiation. How do you stand out and get traction when you don't have customer stories yet, when you're just getting started, right? Like how do you do that? And I remember in those early days, Microsoft launched a product called BizTalk. And BizTalk was very much promising the same thing that Boomi was back then, which was, integrations, this very technical thing. You have to write code. We were saying, hey, let's make this more of a workflow, a configuration-based approach. Microsoft came out with the same message. We're like, oh boy, this is rough. And so really what happened, I mean, to be totally frank, is like, we saw things moving to the cloud early days. And so we're talking like 2006, 2007, early days, right? You had Salesforce getting some attention, but a lot of really small companies still at that point. A lot of, you had maybe NetSuite or Marketo was getting ready to launch, but it was early days.
What year did AWS come out? That was around then, right? Like 2006?
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, it wasn't real. I mean, it wasn't sort of like enterprise ready yet. I mean, we were doing like good old fashioned hosting in a data center still in our first cloud versions of Boomi. So that was all happening, and we said, okay, look, like we're clearly fighting this very crowded market. Let's make a bet that, okay, if everything does move to cloud, the thing we know to be true is the way you integrate these applications together is going to change quite drastically. The product will need to be different. So let's assume that is going to happen, and let's build a new product for that future. And we literally built a new product. And we leveraged a bunch of assets from the on-prem software, some of our connectors, et cetera, but like really build a new product. And what I mean by that is really like cloud native, like multi-tenant, really leveraging the things that were what we believe are going to matter. And the idea of being able to broker data from cloud applications. A lot of our customers in Boomi were using Salesforce, but then they had all this on-prem stuff, SAP down to QuickBooks, right? And so we said, all right, we'll build a new product, make it cloud native. And now we are in a market with two other competitors, right? And so it changed a lot. The new problem then was it was early days. And so we were really searching to find the early adopters. But if you look at the traction of that product, much, much faster, and the business evolved much, much faster, coming out of that bet. So re-platform, re-architecture, and I would say like kind of like bet on the future of where things were going to go and building towards that future.
Who were the two competitors?
So it was a company called Cast Iron, which ironically sold hardware appliances, which is kind of the opposite of a cloud-based approach, right? But nonetheless, they were definitely a very viable competitor back then. And a company called Informatica, who's still around, who does a lot of enterprise kind of ETL type things, but they also had built a cloud-based offering as well. Those were the two we were kind of seeing in every deal in those early days.
Was MuleSoft in that sort of space, or were they a little bit more like SaaS integration?
They not at all back then. Back then, they were an on-premise, open source, what they called enterprise service bus. So their whole play back then was kind of the red hot model. Open source, free, you pay for maintenance services. They later became, and are still today, Boomi's number one competitor. They're now part of Salesforce, but became Boomi's, and are today Boomi's number one competitor. But that was a much later chapter. I want to say that was maybe 2011 or 2012 or something. They started doing more cloud things.
Did Boomi win the category at that time, or was that the category wasn't really like big enough to be kind of won at that time, or?
It's a great question. I think there was a defining moment that I think was huge for Boomi after this launched, and that was that Gartner created a Magic Quadrant, which if you're in the enterprise software world, you probably know what that is, where they sort of rank all the vendors. They made a new one called Integration Platform as a Service. That's what we were calling ourselves, and they put us way up right, which is sort of like leader with most traction. You'd look at the early versions of that thing, and you'd be like, that, wow, there's a clear outlier here. And that was Boomi. That was huge because that became a big lead gen source for us. And Gartner was excited about the category. They were evangelizing it. They were using our customers to tell these iPaaS stories and events. I remember they did a big presentation on LinkedIn, which was an early Boomi customer, talking about all the great things they did using Boomi's cloud product. And that just really, really solidified, I think, Boomi's perception in the market as kind of the innovator, the technology leader in kind of reinventing this space.
Wow, that's cool. So you did a hard pivot from the on-prem to the cloud, pivot. And you didn't get I'll ask, did you get to 1 million ARR before or after that pivot?
Well, good question. We were a little bit over that, but there was no RR in that. There's no R in that revenue because this was on-prem days. So we're selling perpetual license software. So we were around there. But new cloud product also meant new pricing model, to your point, which was a subscription offering, ARR. We did I think a very risky thing, which was we came to market with a new unit of pricing that hadn't been done before, which was effectively the number of systems you want to connect together. We thought that was the closest attribution to value that we could monetize. And since then, the industry is really standardized on that. But trying to rebuild the product and the pricing was hard. But I think to your point, like we're a cloud product. I think there's definitely a thing where like buyers look for patterns and familiarity in pricing. And so while the unit was different, the idea of a recurring revenue subscription, people were like, okay, that's how I pay for Salesforce. That's how I'll pay for Boomi. I think that lined up, and I think it got traction once we figured that out.
It's really cool. So there was traction on the on-prem, it sounds like, but when you guys flipped to that cloud model, and then it's so amazing, those Gartner Magic Quadrants, they can really make or break a category or single companies. But that was like the oasis moment, from what I heard in your story, when you realized, like, all right, we found the water source. We can we can work with this here.
We found the water source, and then over the next 2 years, we end of lifed that on-prem product, and we converted everybody over. And some people didn't want to make the conversion to cloud. Most did. I mean, it was such a better user experience. It was such a better product all around. But it was a hard choice. I mean, this was a burn the ships kind of decision, right? There was no going back from what we were doing. We felt like that was the right level of severity and decision making on this pivot because of that crowded market. So yes, that was the oasis moment, definitely.
I want to take a quick break from the episode and say, if you're enjoying this content, the best way you can say thank you is to subscribe. So if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, hit the subscribe button there as well. And also share it out to your friends and colleagues. If you find this content useful and you think other people will enjoy it as well, please send it out. And back to the episode.
Now let's flip to Guru, and
yes.
Same metaphor, same desert. You put yourself out in the middle of the desert trying to find the water. What was that one like, and how was that different?
Totally. Very different. So with that one, I would say the early learning was this, like the first obsession, like the first focus and obsession and North Star metric for us was active usage, because we said, look, more important than how you create knowledge and how you manage it in a system like this, if employees aren't using it to find what they need, it's all academic, right? Nothing else really matters. And that we lived the pain of low adoption, et cetera. So that was our North Star metric. And we said, okay, well, what is the best way to do that? And I think what I would say was like the first kind of product market fit there is this is a category of software, what you might call, you were naming it, the category thing is a lot blurrier in the Guru days than it was then. Some people will call it an intranet, some people will call it knowledge management, knowledge base, wiki. But broadly speaking, these products are broad and horizontal. And the thing that we honed in on first, where we got that, to your point, that first kind of $1 million in ARR, was focusing in on a specific team and buyer and a specific use case. And for us, that ended up being sales teams. Some of the reason behind that choice of sales teams was back in the Boomi days. We had that lived experience. We saw sales reps flailing when they couldn't have a system like this to respond quickly to customers, consistently position, et cetera. We said, okay, let's start there. We also had, we could articulate and speak to the pain because of that lived experience. So we said, okay, we're going to start there. We're going to get really honed, really specific. We're going to start with tech sales teams, so software sales teams. We're going to say, okay, once you get to figure this out, but like once you get to about 20 sales reps, this becomes a must-have. It's no longer a nice-to-have, because you've got enough kind of need for repeatability and consistency. You can no longer just be like, hey, Brian, what? Tell me about that competitor again, because now you're getting hammered with like 20 reps. You can't, right? You need a system. And so we said, all right, we're going to do that. So we honed in on this very small addressable market, but kind of intentionally, because we're like, look, let's really kind of nail this first, and then we can sort of build out from there. And so that I think was the biggest, when I look back, oasis moment. A lot of flailing to get there. I mean, you would see old versions of Guru that launched that were much less opinionated on use case and user, and were much more kind of like a modern wiki and sign, to your point on PLG, sign up yourself, try it, convert, buy it. We were really experimenting with a lot of different go-to-market motions before we honed in on this. And I'd say the other thing on that too is like, not only was it like, the use case and the team, like I mentioned, Also the go-to-market motion. I mean, it kind of, somewhat ironically, because we really don't do this today, it was really an outbound centric thing because we were so focused on that market. We said, all right, we know who these companies are. Let's find them, target them, and prospect them. So we're literally doing like SDR, outbound emailing. And that was the first kind of repeatability we built on.
And you mentioned a couple things like sales, like going, having your sales teams, your SDRs, AEs doing demos on outbounds leads or outbounds prospects, and then you mentioned product-led growth. Like, which one worked better? Was it definitely the SDR outbound approach that really kind of took you guys into motion?
I would say the PLG motion ultimately was better. It ultimately scaled better, and that's why. The thing with the SDR motion that we later learned over the years is it's tough to scale that. You talked about price point differences, and yeah, you can. We have our very small business segment. People sign up and buy 3 seats, right? And you can't really have a human involved in that kind of at all because you just can't. It will never scale. And so what we later honed and figured out was something that more resembled PLG. And I think as the macro economy's changed, we've actually shifted with that, which we can talk about that in a bit if you want. But yes, I would say PLG was better for us because it could scale better. We've effectively moved away from what I'd call any sort of like repeatable outbound SDR motion. Again, mostly it's price points. It's just not. We just don't. We don't want to create this big. We don't want to force feed you by. We ultimately want your whole company using Guru, but we don't want to force feed that on someone. And oftentimes, a small team starts and expands from there. So we really want to kind of like align to that customer journey versus trying to force fit a model that isn't going to scale.
Just for the listeners, PLG, it's product-led growth, and essentially it's a sales strategy used by SaaS companies, typically B2B SaaS companies, where instead of trying to have a sales team go out and pitch your prospects and close deals through more of a traditional sales model, you let the product do the sales for you. And typically it looks like a 14-day trial or a 30-day trial where you sign up, you get, full access or some limited set of access to the product. You get to experience it and use it. There's kind of like a really well-designed UX around the onboarding process so that you can really get your data in there quickly and easily and get the full benefit of the product in that trial period. Now back to our conversation. So I was listening to the All In podcast the other day, and they were talking about product-led growth as a strategy. And one of the things they were talking about was, if you do product-led growth too early, you might actually be shooting yourself in the foot, because in order for you to do product-led growth successfully, you actually need to really know who your ICP, your ideal customer profile is. You need to really know what problems you're solving. You really need to know exactly what process to guide them through to convert them. And if you try to do product-led growth too early, it might not be that the product's wrong. It might just be that your audience or your targeting or your ICP is wrong. And you just need to figure that out. Like, the sales environment provides so much feedback. So even if you're losing money technically on your P&L with your sales costs in the beginning, it probably makes sense to still do that, because the learning there is so valuable in the long-term roadmap of the business.
I totally agree. I mean, I would say 2 things there that played out for us accidentally, though. We weren't like, hey, we're going to do this intentionally for that reason on the sales side. It was more the reason I said, hone in on the addressable market, find those folks. But absolutely, we did learn. I would say it's everything you just said, how to pitch and frame the value. The other thing we did unscalably, very early, was we set up customer success humans very early at Guru and had them working on accounts that we knew we would never have a CSM working on it at scale. But to your exact point, because I think there it's you have this I'm going to log into your product. What are the steps until I have seen a first value moment? And that is, in my opinion, the whole thing with PLG. Kind of monetization, less important. It's like if there is not to your point, detailed understanding of what has to happen from there to that activation moment where that team is oh, I see, I get this, I will come back and retain and do more with your product, all is lost. And so, yes, I agree. It would have been very hard for us to do that without that qualitative input. Yeah, I think it's a great call out.
Yeah, cool. So now one thing we didn't touch on for people listening is like the scale of Boomi and Guru. They're both really impressive companies. Like you've reached some pretty impressive scale. Whatever you're willing to share, whether it's like headcount, any kind of like revenue or exit numbers, I think that would be pretty interesting for the listeners to kind of hear the scale of what you built with both of these companies.
Yeah, well, it's a good question on Boomi. I don't know how much Dell gets into some of the revenue specifics, but I mean, today it's up to 1,500 employees. It was pretty small when we were acquired. I think we were about 50 employees when we were acquired. I think we had in the order of several hundred customers. I stayed at Dell for about 3 years to really, help do what I could to make the Boomi business continue to thrive inside of Dell. And Dell later sold it out again, and it is now its own independent company again.
I didn't know that.
But that happened maybe about 2 years ago. And actually, there's a new CEO who took over after my successor, named Steve Lucas, as of a few months ago. So yeah, they're up to some great things now. Still headquartered here in the Philly area, and so. Guru is sort of quite a bit further along in compared to where Boomi was when we were acquired. We're about 150 employees now. We have something like 2,500 customers, ranging from VSB to enterprises that are like Nike, DHL, Etsy, Shopify, Spotify. A lot of kind of bigger tech brands. Use the company, use the product. And so I think we my aspirational goal is to, do what I could to make Guru more consequential, at least in the time that I was employed there. But, so far so good.
Cool. So what's your vision for Guru? Like, where do you see it going?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can't not answer this question and connect it to some of the AI things going on, because we sort of towards the end of last year really leaned in hard to the things that large language models can do for a product like ours, because knowledge is this untapped asset within companies, and it's hard without automation and capabilities like AI to sort of manually find knowledge and write it and share it and make sure people are using it and all of that. And we are just, I think, rapidly looking to reshape this category, this set of categories. Get rid of that patchwork where companies need to have an intranet and a wiki and a knowledge base, and create what I think companies have always wanted, which is like a place for employees to go to get their questions answered. And I think that like many ventures, right, you sort of have these pivotal technology moments, and they happen, and then you go, oh, okay, let's rethink those old problems in a new way. And so, the vision for the company has always been, we want to give every team in the world trusted information so they can do their best work. And that part hasn't changed, but the how we go about doing it has changed. So, our vision is to leverage AI natively into the product to help customers think about that entire life cycle, identifying what they need, which is everything from like pointing our system at Slack channels and having it come back and say, like, Brian, everyone keeps asking this question, your team's getting bogged down. Turn that into, knowledge, so they don't have to go and bother humans in places like Slack anymore. Workflows around the writing experience, let me get my raw thoughts in Guru, and then let Guru reformat it, put it into the customer's like tone and brand guidelines and styles they use for writing. Don't make me have to go and do that all manually, right? Like give me a true answer workflow where I can just ask a question and get an answer back. That's something we're working on now. We're super excited about that, because it's like, boy, if you can just not have to reconcile a whole bunch of search results and just get the person right to an answer and have credible sources underneath that. And then like, how do you improve that flywheel to make it better? And so there it's like leveraging all the data in Guru to say like, okay, you've got all this content now. What happens when you need to change it? And that's I think another huge opportunity for us is that's very manual today. In any system, you have to open up these documents and pages and change them and improve them. And we just think that whole thing can be streamlined. So we think I really do think there is, for our category, right? I'm being very conscientious of not getting into hype, but like, where are the real actual use cases of technology like this that can be transformative for companies? I think in our category, there are amazing opportunities here that I am like pretty fired up about. So timely question, I think, because we've been really doubling down on our thinking there. With
Yeah, I mean,
it's
huge. This AI platform revolution. It's a true platform revolution. Like the Metaverse thing, that was hype. I think Web3, Metaverse, NFTs, like that was hype. But it's not hard to see the real practical use case of AI. Whether you're using like a OpenAI API or product like Whisper or something, or if you're using if you're training your own models using TensorFlow, implementing it deep inside your product, it's not hard to see the real world use case of AI in business. And it's like, think about with your two companies, Boomi. In order for Boomi to succeed, you needed cloud platforms. Pre 2006, 2005, those didn't exist.
Yeah.
In order for Guru to exist, you needed browser extension ecosystems. And but before browsers had extensions, Guru couldn't exist.
Yeah.
So like AI is another, and I think even like more pivotal platform revolution that will open up entire new categories, reinvent existing categories, and it's really exciting. There's obviously a lot of change that's going to come out of it, but I have a tech services company, so we build software for clients, and we've already been implementing it for a lot of different things. And like the use cases are just wild. Like some of it's just simple, implement the GPT-3, 5 API and just like process some data and then just use it for, storing or categorizing data in a database, like really simple use cases. And then other use cases are like, for instance, we had a client that has this one manual process that they can never get to, but it's really important. And it takes like 2 man years of effort every year, and it's like extremely time intensive. They don't even like fully if different people are doing the process, the results can be pretty wildly different depending on who does it and just when they do it, and I guess whatever mindset they're in while they're doing the process.
Oh boy.
And so we like kind of codified that process for them and got that 2 man years of human time spent down to about like 2 to 3 hours of processing, which costs roughly, it was like $15 in compute on OpenAI.
Amazing. Yeah. But like these are the stories, to your point, right? I mean, these are the stories. This is why when you were talking about other examples and you sort of look back, like, yeah, it's kind of hype, because it ends up feeling inaccessible, or it's great in theory, but when you go and try and do it, right? But the fact that the stories like you just told, the customer would repeat that story back. It's not just you telling it, right? They'd say the same thing, and I can only imagine how much value that must have brought to them. But this is, the fact that it is accessible, the fact that you can see these stories, the fact that any human can log into a ChatGPT and start interacting with it and experience it on their own, I think that's how we sort of go, okay, there is something real here. This isn't one of those technically opaque, inaccessible things where we think it might be good, but we aren't really sure. This is like, no, you can, in 5 minutes, you can be like, whoa, there's something to this. Yeah, I agree with you.
Hypothetically, let's just say, you exited Guru, you're out, you're ready to do, you take the proverbial six months to go travel, hang with the family, whatever, and you're ready to do it again. What would you do if you were going to build another one right now? What would you do?
It's a good question. I don't.
Put you
I
on the
don't know.
spot.
Maybe. Well, no, it's a totally fair question, but it's one of those like I'd probably give you a different answer next week. But I think I will tell you what I would love to do again, just to change it all up again, right? Like most of my, we've talked about this. Most of my passions and interests is revolves around music, and
Yeah, we were talking about that at the at Chris Wink's thing.
Exactly. And I think there are, with relative few exceptions, there is tremendous technology opportunity to put more of the power back in the hands of the artists. And if I were going to do that, if I were going to do something today and had the privilege of choice, I would really see if I could do something like that. And as long as it didn't change my relationship with music, which is like, I wouldn't want to regret it. Like, like you love a thing and then you go into the industry of it and you're like, oh, now it's, as long as that didn't happen, like I'd love to do something there. Yeah.
Music is like an effed up industry though, man. It's, it's been through so many changes. I mean, look back at, it all started with, what's his name? Sean Parker. Napster, and
Napster,
the whole Metallica thing, the lawsuits there, and then that was like the start of, I think there was always cracks in the foundation of the music industry, and that was kind of like the moment when the kind of the tower started to crumble and fall down.
Yeah.
And then totally. There's been so many changes, like Spotify now, which I think Sean Parker is also involved in some way. I think he's an investor or something, and you've got like all these streaming services, and I've seen one of my favorite bands is Queensryche. The new singer Todd LaTorre, he's pretty big on social media, and he'll go on and he'll upload like his royalty check from Spotify. He's like, hey, check out, I got $150 from Spotify for our or like 200 whatever, like 200,000 plays that we got yesterday or whatever.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think it's all it's and then add the idea of artist licensing, and now you're starting to see like AI driven recreations of songs, and you're starting to see some artists be like, cool, let's go, let's split royalties. Other artists going like, no, you can't do that. Record labels like, I don't even understand this. Like, there's something there, right? And like, I think there is like a bit of a, I don't know anything about any of how the industry side works, but I think there's something to that. Like there's this, like, certainly in the enterprise software world, there's this adage of like, if you knew the category you were getting into before you went into it, would you actually go into it? Because it's like the fresh eyes look and benefit of rethinking the problem, but also like all the warts that you sort of, if you already know about, it could just sort of like terrify you. So I don't know.
It's also just being like dumb to the industry. The rules lets you go in and not have you kind of said like not have the preconceived notions of how it's supposed to be done, but it also you're not scared to go into it because you're not afraid of like what you have to overcome. And there's something else I'm trying to say, it's like escaping me, but it's almost like you make mistakes that turn out to be like Bob Ross, like happy little accidents that, you make mistakes that turn into actual wins down the road.
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. So who knows, but the thought of another one is not anything that gets any recurring real estate in my brain at this point.
Well, Rick, this is an awesome episode. Anything you want to close on before we hop off, or?
No, I mean, I've enjoyed the conversation. I'm always available online, LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm easy to find, Rick Nucci, and so would love to connect if anyone wanted to hear anything more about some of the mistakes we made, or the accidentally good decisions, or the good decisions. I'm happy to share. So I appreciate it, Brian.
Cool, man. Thanks for coming on.
Did you clear your cash flow?